Now that you've gone through the tutorial about basic keyframing in Animation Master, we're going to go through creating a walk cycle with the Will character, just doing a simple walk cycle. We're going to do this first of all in an action. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on objects, I'm going to say import model, go to the Will model, open it up. I'm just going to close that window. Then I'm just going to double click on the actions folder. What that does is it'll create a new action, nothing in it except for Will. Now there's some kind of spiffy things in Animation Master that you can use, such as has stride length, which kind of calculates a stride for him. I'm just going to do it the kind of, if you want to call it, raw, unadulterated way of doing a walk cycle. The first thing that I'm going to do is, you'll notice this is kind of how I have my setup when I animate. I have my project workspace over here so I can access things easily. I have my timeline down here with usually my graph editor up, and then I have my properties and my pose sliders. And I just leave it kind of like this, just kind of set up in this manner. Now I try and get as much screen space as I can here. With the Will model, I basically put in controls so that we can do a walk cycle very easily. Now, one thing that you need to do is in Animation Master, keys, you can't force a key on anything until it has a keyframe already. So if I click on the hand here and then I go down to force a keyframe and I click it, you'll notice that there's no keyframe made. If I go into the dope sheet or the keyframe marker window, there's no keyframe there, even though I click it and I push the button. So what I do to get around this is I go through and I just push up and down on the keypad, on the arrows on your keyboard. So now you can see that there is a keyframe set there. There's a keyframe right there. I grab the elbow, do the same thing, or rotate it just slightly, and then rotate it back. Same with this. The nice thing about using the rotate manipulator, I could just grab it and move it, but with the rotate manipulator, it'll actually snap to degrees. So you make sure that it's snapping by going to Tools, Options, and then in Units, Rotate Snap Angle is set to 5, right there. So I just do that up and down. This one too, up, down, back to 0. This one, same thing, 5, 0. This one, you can rotate it 5, 0 and translate it. So it has a keyframe. Now these, I'm just going to go there and then back, because I don't translate these at all. So I'm just going up the spine here, just making sure I touch everything, but making sure it gets back to 0. Okay, and this, just rotate it just a little bit. The hips, rotate those just a slight bit. Knees, there and back, there and back. Now you'll notice that Animation Master will automatically set keyframes for you when you move something. In Maya, it's known as like Auto Key, and XSI, same thing. And all it does is it basically makes sure that whenever you grab something and move it, that it creates a keyframe for that object or for that piece. So I'm just going to move up, down, and then rotate it just a little bit. Okay, and just do the toe. Okay, so that's done. Got that one. That's got a keyframe. This, rotate it. Okay, and then this, up, down, and rotate like that. So now I believe I have keyframes on every thing except for the body bone here. I'm going to rotate it. Just go like this and back, and then I'm also going to translate it, so just go up, down. Okay. So now I have a keyframe for everything in here, except for the fingers, but I'm just going to wait to do that for a minute here. I want to make sure I've got all the controls here. I've got control body. That has keyframes on it. Now sometimes the little button doesn't show until you click it, the little plus. So I'm going to go into my side view here, and first of all, let me relax my fingers. I'm actually going to go to show finger bones, and hit on. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my fingers, and I'm going to start just kind of putting them in kind of a relaxed state. Okay, so just a little bit more there, a little bit more here, and then the pinky, just a little bit more, like that. And then I'm going to grab the thumb, just move it in a little bit, and maybe roll that in just a little bit. So that's kind of just a relaxed position. Now, I'm going to turn off the Show Manipulator Properties box, and I might turn that on again when I want it, but as of right now I don't. Now, when we rig the character, we put this finger parent, or the control fingers bone, in there for good reason. You can copy and paste mirrored in Animation Master, but it's weird because on the fingers, and I've noticed this on pretty much every model I've ever done, on fingers, like if I have the hand down here and one hand up here, if I copy one hand and paste mirrored, it's not going to do it because it's not correct. It's not correctly mirrored. So it doesn't necessarily go on what it was, but what it is. Except for the other body, I don't really know why the fingers don't work that well. But so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to. This is the other thing you have to do. Make sure that the entire body, the key model bone, or the key model, is checked right here. I'm going to go in the window, I'm going to hit copy, Control C, and then I'm going to hit the branch button and go over here and select the control fingers and go up to Edit, Paste Mirrored. Now you'll see it just pasted the mirror on that other side. So now that I have that done, I'm going to turn the finger bones off so I don't need to see them. And so now my hands are relaxed and I'm ready to start with my walk cycle. Now I usually start from the side, and I like to start from the side because I can see just my stride. So I usually grab the foot. Now what I've done in this is I've actually, in the controls, I actually constrained this so it doesn't go below 0. Now the way that you can do that is you can right click on it, say New Constraint, Translate Limits, and then in that you say minimum Y is 0. And that way it will never go below the floor plane. Now I already did that in the control rig. So if you go up here, you notice I go to Relationships, User Properties, Constraints, Control. If I go down here, let's see here, Control Foot Left, Translate Limits, 0 in the Y. Control Foot Right, Translate Limits, 0 in the Y. And those are turned on, so I don't need to worry about doing them again in the action. But you can do it in the action if you haven't set it up, and then that way you can grab this foot, it'll go as high as you want, and then it will never go below the 0 plane. Okay. So I usually start with the feet. I want to put my feet where they need to be very first thing. So I'm going to grab this foot, pull it out forward a little bit, grab this foot, pull it out back a little bit, just about like that. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I want to raise his heel up so he's up on his toe. So I'm going to grab it, raise his heel up. And this one, I'm just going to rotate it up on his heel. Now it looks like I'm going to want to have his foot out a little further, so I'm actually just going to move it, click on it and drag it out a little more, and then rotate it up. Now it's off the ground just a little bit, but that's okay because I'm going to actually move the body bone here. I'm just going to move it down a little bit till that heel hits the ground right there. I'm actually going to move this foot back a little bit. I want him a little bit bigger stride. Okay. So there we have that. I'm going to rotate this toe up a little bit. Now remember, when you're in a side view or a front view, an orthographic view, in other words, you can grab a bone and you can rotate it, and it will rotate in the plane that you're working on. So if you're ever wondering, you can either, if you're in this view, I can hit R and rotate, and then I can use the manipulator, or I can just hit to the side, 6 on the numpad or 4, and then I can just rotate it, and it will just rotate there for me. Okay, so I'm going to roll this heel just a little bit more, and I think I want to move it back just a little bit out there. Okay, now the body bone, like I said, moved down just a little bit, just so his knee was bent slightly. Okay, now that's going to be my stride right here. And I'm going to work on just the lower body first. So let's go to the front view. Now, right here, his feet are just as they were. They haven't moved in the X direction at all. And his hips are flat, which is fine. This is the middle of the stride, so your balance is right in the middle. You're not balancing weight on either foot. You're right in the middle. So I want him to just be straight up and down, right where he is. But I want to add a little bit on his foot here. I'm actually going to take his foot, hit R to rotate. Oops, wrong one. Rotate it out just a little bit, so it looks like he's just got a little bit of a wide step there, and then grab his knee and move it out just slightly. Okay. So that's going to be his step. Okay, so that's the bottom half right there. Now, I want this walk to be kind of a normal walk, which is going to be about 24 frames long. So my other stride is going to be at 12. Now the nice thing about Animation Master here is I can go to frame 0. I don't have to have anything selected. I can hit Control C to copy. Oops, make sure that my entire model is keyed. Control C to copy. I'm just going to scroll over to 12 and hit Edit, Paste Mirrored. And you notice that he just switched. So as I click on bones right here, you'll see there's a keyframe now here and here, and it's just the opposite. You notice the legs kind of walking there. Now it's not perfect by any means, and there's a lot to go. But this is the opposite of this. So it's just the stride is out here. So I've got those two keyframes down. Now I need my passing position. Now my passing position makes a lot of difference as to how my walk is perceived, or what it looks like. Now I'm just going to do a normal walk here, and we'll probably do a better walk later on. But at frame 6 is going to be my passing position. And you could do a passing position closer or further away, but I'm going to do it all this way, and then we can slide the timing around. So I'm going to go to frame 6, but I want to make sure, you'll notice at frame 6 that I can't tell which foot I'm clicking. So I'm going to go to frame 0, click on the front foot, that's the one that's going to be traveling backwards. Go to frame 6, and then in my properties here, go to my transform, rotate, 0 everything out, right there. Now you notice, one thing you'll notice is the rotate, and I told this to you in the previous tutorial, but the rotate in the object properties, if you click on the individual ones, you won't see a graph, but if you click on rotate, you'll see the splines. So I zeroed that out, grab the toe, zero that out, and grab the heel. Okay, and zero that out. Make sure it's all 0. Okay, and then I want my other foot, my passing foot, to go up a little bit. I want to rotate it down. I'm going to make the heel rotate back a little bit. And I don't want him to go too high, but I want him to go about here and just flop that toe a little bit. So here's my passing position right here. Okay, now go to my 2. Go to 2. Now at this one, I want him to rotate his foot out slightly on the pass, about like this. So I'm going to grab the knee and bring it out, and this one's fine. Straighten the knee out a little bit. Okay. Now, one rule that you have to remember is when you're doing a walk cycle, you have to think about the balance. In this passing position, all of his weight is right here on this foot. So I'm actually going to grab the body bone, hit N, and if you can't see it, go hit 8 on the keypad, or not on the numpad, but on the keyboard to go into wireframe. For some reason, their manipulators don't draw on top of geometry, and maybe that's fixed by now. But I'm going to grab it, and I'm just going to move his body over the top of his foot. Let me turn on rulers here real quick, and I'm going to put a guide in here so you can see where his foot is, and I've lined his body up with his foot, with where his weight is distributed. Okay. So there's the weight. Now, the further I do this, the more it looks like he really goes from side to side, obviously. But I don't want it to do too much, but I want it to look like it's balanced. So I can either put it right there, or I can go just a tiny bit less. I'm just going to go a little bit less. That way he's not moving from side to side so much. Now, one thing is in your passing position, your weight is going to be distributed to this leg, and so your body is going to, your hips are going to tilt to that side because this is the direction that your hips are going. This leg right here is pointing forward, so not only is it tilting that way, but it's also twisted, leading that other leg just slightly, just ever so slightly. So I turned his hips just a little bit to make sure that that leg, that they're going that far. Now, the more you swing the hips, the more it looks like a female walk. So I'm going to do just a little less like that. Now, if I was doing a female walk, it'd go up pretty high. So I'm just going to do it just slightly. So that's about up, straight up and down. I'm going to go just a little bit and make sure that the knee is a little bit out, and this one's doing okay. Don't want him out too far. But like you said, or like I said, when you're doing this, you can stylize this quite a bit just by having his feet way out or breaking joints or anything like that. So now I've got this position set at 6. So you notice he walks and then takes his other step. So he moves from side to side here. If I look at it in the front view, if you watch his legs, starts here, takes his step, follows through, and hits that other step. Okay. Now he may be moving side to side just a little bit too much. So I'm going to go right here. I'm going to grab the body bone, hit 8 to go into wireframe, and I'm going to slide him back just a little bit so he's not quite as much. Now one thing that's really nice is you can click the body bone, click on translate, and you can see your graph right here. Now he's moving in the X this direction with that bone. Now I can grab this and I can just move that however I want it to go, so I can see the way, or see how far he's moving from side to side. I'm going to go about half, so I'm going to do about right there. That's one really nice thing about the graph editor in Hash, is the way that it works. So I've got this position all the way to the second step, but that's not all of it. Now there's a few things that I need to do to make sure that it's working correctly. First of all, the height of his walk is determined by the stride. Now, his body bone is going to determine how high he is. On the cross right here, he should be the same as he is this here and here. So if I go to my Y value, you'll see it's all the same. It's flat. Now I'm talking about this bone moving in its Y direction, his hips. It should be even, just like this. A lot of people are under the assumption that on the crossing pose right here, that's the height of the walk, but that's really not true. What it is we're going to look at the height here. Now, halfway through is frame 3. Now, if I scrub to frame 3, I actually don't have to scrub to frame 3 at all. I could be over here. But when I click on the line, it puts a keyframe there. And I can grab that keyframe and I can drag it. Now you can see him going down, and then I'm going to go to 9, click it, and go up. And I'm going to go up enough that his leg straightens out, or almost. Okay. So you can see I don't want to go too far down here. I could have him go way down and then way back up, but I don't want him to go too far. So he drops and extends up on his walk. Whoop. Now I do want him to go a little further. Okay. Now I need to make sure that my tangents are correct. So I'm going to click right here. Make sure that you've clicked your show bias handles. Click the end of the handle and drag it, and you can stretch it out a little bit if you want, but just smooth out that curve so it's a nice sine curve. Okay. So now you can notice if I go to translate, he's moving out to the side on that leg and back. He's moving down and back up on the push through on your leg. And then on the Z, it's really not doing anything. Maybe he's moving forward slightly. Now this is another dynamic. If I wanted to make him move a little bit differently, I could have him in the middle on the stride, move a little bit forward here so that he kind of lunges into his walk. Like that. And that's all things that you can do just with these basic simple keyframes. So let's have him do that. Let's have him lunge into his walk. That way his body's not straight up and down the entire time. I also want to make sure that I've rotated the body bone just slightly. And right now I don't think I want to do that. What it does is you want that line of action in your animation. You want this line of action going because you're walking forward. You want to have that kind of lunge forward. You either do that or kind of arches back up and keep his hands up high, look like he's kind of strutting or something like that. That's kind of what I want to do, so I'm actually going to roll it back to where it was. So now I've got this. And one thing that I want to make sure I do is I want to make sure I go to 6 and I say force keyframe, and that will force a keyframe on everything. And then at 3, I want to do the same thing. So I'm going to say force a keyframe. And then at 9, same thing, force a keyframe. So now everything has a keyframe. If I click on here and then click on bones, you'll see here that all the bones, they all have keyframes on 0, 3, 6, 9, and 12. And that's very nice for when you want to start sliding stuff around for timing. It helps out quite a bit. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I want to make sure that the feet are doing what they need to do. Now right here you'll notice that his foot, his stride foot, rocks down till it's flat right here. I actually want it to flatten out quicker than that. So I'm actually going to go to frame 3, hit that, hit rotate, and I want it to zero out the rotation here, and then I want to zero out the rotation on the toes. So now, very quickly, he just goes boom and hits and goes through on his walk. Okay. Now as I'm doing this, it's kind of one of those things where you need to keep watching it and scrubbing it. I think he may move forward just a little too much with that body bone. So I'm going to click on the body bone, go back to my graph editor, hit transform, translate Z, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually move these all up so it's not quite as much. Now I'm just hitting the up arrow key. So I selected all of them, hit the up arrow key. Now I can use this and just click and drag if I want to. I like to use the arrow key just because it's a little more precise and I don't screw up. I don't accidentally create a keyframe or something like that. So I just grabbed these and I moved them up just a little bit to keep that curvature. But now you can see he still moves forward a little bit, but not as much as he used to. So just a little bit. So I like that. Okay, so the bottom half of his body is done on this. So far, there'll be a lot of tweaks that we do. But now you can see, okay, so from here, just doing a normal walk. Okay, so it looks good. So now what we're going to do is do his upper body. Okay, so on this stride right here, obviously when you're walking, your shoulders and your hips go in different directions. And you'll notice that here, one thing I neglected to do was to swivel his hips from the start. With this leg lunged forward and this one backward, I need to grab his hips here and I need to rotate them forward just a little bit, not too much, just a little bit. Keep his knee out like this and keep this knee in. But that way you can see him reaching with that leg. Okay, so it's not only is it straight up and down, but it's reaching a little bit. Okay. So his shoulders are going to go the opposite direction. So I'm actually going to work up his back. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to rotate it just a little bit the opposite way, and this one a little bit more. Okay. I'll worry about his head in just a minute. But you can see how his shoulders are going in a different direction. and you can see his shoulders go this way and his hips are going this way, and that's what you want in a walk cycle. You don't want the shoulders to be parallel with the hips like this, or this way and this way. You don't want that. You want shoulders this way, hips that way. That's just the way we walk as human beings. That's the way we're built. So that's the way we need to animate it. So his back is still straight up and down, which is fine, but it's twisted a little bit. And I'm going to take his neck, I'm going to twist it back just a little bit, and then I'm going to rotate it just a little bit back towards here, and then take his head and rotate it even more so that he's looking straight ahead as he's walking. So I'm just going to grab it, pull it like that. Or what I can do is go into side view and just grab it and pull it straight back, and it'll do that. Hit 9 on the keyboard to go into just shaded mode, not wireframe. So I've got all the way up to his head set for right there. Now I want his hands. Now remember, when this leg is forward, this hand is backwards. When this leg is backwards, this hand is forward. So I want to make sure that I do that. So I'm going to actually grab his hand, go into my top view, pull it forward. Okay, and then go into my side view, pull it down a bit. Don't want to extend it too far. Roll it. Just do that right there. And then this one. And then go in my front view by hitting 2 on the keypad. His hand down here. Hand like that. Roll his elbow out just a little bit. And then pull it back a little bit. So there we have a pose. And his shoulders I'm just going to leave right here the way they are. They're keyed, but I just want to leave them right there. Okay. So right there is the pose that I want. I'm actually going to take this hand back just a little bit. Right there. So that's the pose I want for the first stride. So I'm going to click off of it, make sure that my key model button is selected. I'm going to hit Control C. I'm going to go to 12. I'm going to hit Edit, Paste Mirrored. And you'll notice that it just pasted everything the opposite direction. So now you can see that frame is the opposite of that frame, which is really cool. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click the hands, and I'm going to delete all the keyframes right in the middle. Grab this one, delete all the keyframes right in the middle. So now it's starting to interpolate for me. Okay. So in the passing position right here, I want to go to my front view, and I want my hands. I want this hand to come down here, and this hand to come down here, here. Now remember, this is coming from, this hand started up here and it's swinging back this way, so the hand should be following, or should be lagging behind the arm. The opposite is on here. This hand started back here and it's swinging up this way, and so the hand will be following the wrist right there, should be lagging behind. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to my side view here. This hand should be coming this way, and this hand should be rotated around like this. Sometimes it's easier to, instead of grabbing here, you'll notice how the hand kind of rotates as you do this. If you hit the rotate manipulator and grab the ball and just drag it, a lot of times it's a lot easier, and you can use the manipulator at the same time. So I'm just going to put the hand kind of in a lag position. I'm also going to grab the end of the bone and just kind of pull it down so it's a little more extended, and I'm going to pull it out so it doesn't hit the leg. And then this one, I want to make sure 4 on the numpad to go into the left view, or the right view. This one I'm going to make sure that it's rotated up just a little bit. Kind of like this. And in the crossing position, the hands are going to be down further, so I'm actually going to drop the shoulders just a little bit. And that's going to mean I'm going to want to drop the hands just a little bit. Okay? So we're going to kind of have some floppy hands. But, so that's my passing position with the hands. Now, the other thing that I need to worry about in this passing position is the shoulders. Now you'll notice I tip the shoulders down, but remember that your contrapposto, my hips right now are slanted this way, so I need my shoulders to be slanted this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab this one, pull it over just a little bit, and then grab this one and slant him down just a little bit. And then I'm going to grab the neck and then the head like this. So now I've got the hips going this way and the shoulders going this way, and that's what I want. So just to make sure that the hands are in the right place, that they're not too high, I think they're just right, just where I want them. Okay. So I'm just going to say force keyframe on all. Okay. And then you'll notice the keys right here. I'm actually going to delete 3 and 9 right here. 3 and 9 here. 3 and 9, because I set these before they had any movement on them, so I don't want this screwing them up. So right here, and the shoulders too, gotta get rid of those. So I'm going to go delete 3 and 9, delete 3 and 9. Okay, so now I've got this kind of drop his arms, walk thing going on here. So from the front view, if you hit Shift Z, it will frame everything in the window. So it looks pretty good. Drops his shoulders a bit. Hands follow through a little bit. Watch his hand. I want to make sure that the arcs are correct. Now right there, right here, I'll fix that with 9, with the keyframe for 9. You can see right here, his elbow is hyperextended. It's not bent because the hand is trying to reach this control bone, and see the hand is about right here, but the control bone's about right here, so it's just straightening out too much. It's the IK problem, but we'll fix that with another keyframe. So I want to make sure I got my arcs in there, but as for right now, this looks pretty good. And it looks like, if I look at the other side here, I can mark, do this with a whiteboard marker on your screen if you have a CRT. Mark his hand here and see where it is. Actually, what I'll do is I'll do this, put a marker in, go here, so it's down there, and then up here, right here. So I remember it went here to here and then back over to here. So it's got this nice arc like this, swinging forward. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to right click on here, say clear all. And I think those keyframes are good and set. So I've just got my major keyframes right here. Now, on the lower body, I have 3 and 9 set too. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to 3, check my animation, see what it looks like. Everything's looking pretty good. I want to check my graphs, check my rotations here. Looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. They're all nice and smooth. And elbows, same kind of thing. Okay. So now I'm going to go to 3, and I'm going to say force a keyframe. So for everything. And I'm going to go to 9, say force a keyframe on everything. Now remember, this arm was a little bit too low. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab it and drag it up just a little bit. You'll notice the curve right here. I can grab it and drag it just so that it doesn't hyperextend. That's better. Okay. Let's make sure this hand, go here, 9, it's looking fine. Okay, now one thing I definitely want to do with these is make sure that the curves are smooth. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to go to transform, translate, and then I'm going to just focus in on one of these. Now you'll notice that in the graph here, I want to make sure that this curve is smooth. If I click here, you'll notice the tangent's a little bit off, so I'm actually going to grab it. Now another thing you'll notice is that this is almost a straight shot, but I want it to curve a little bit, so I'm going to grab it and I'm just going to drag it down just a little bit right here. And that's what I want. Okay, so and then I'm going to go to Y. Y is straight. That means it's up and down motion. It's just kind of staying where it needs to be. So that's fine. And then Z is kind of an arc here, but I'm going to grab this frame. I'm going to move it up a little bit so it's a better arc. So now you can see how my curves are all nice and smooth. This one looks like it's a bit different. So I'm going to move it up just a little bit right there. Now one thing I've learned in Animation Master is that it tends to crash quite frequently. So I'm actually going to right click on the action, say save as. I'm just going to save it as Will Walk 01. If it hasn't crashed on you by now, you're lucky. I'm pretty lucky too. But we're doing pretty simple things. It's when you get into a lot of the more complex things that it tends to crash. But okay, so I looked at that hand. I want to look at this hand and make sure everything's right. So I'm going to go to translate, just isolate one of them, grab this one here, move it up just a little bit so it's a nicer curve. Y is fine, and Z, same thing. I'm going to move it up just a little bit so it's a little bit of a nicer curve. Now look how it hyperextends right here a little bit. What I need to do is I need to go to this keyframe and go to 6 on the numpad and just pull it in just a little bit so that it doesn't hyperextend. Now I may have done that. Yeah, it looks like I did that when I did the X translation. If I grabbed it, see how it hyperextends there. So I don't want it to. So I want to just keep it from hyperextending. This one, I want to check the tangents, just make sure that the curve is right. And then I'm going to go to my rotations, and they all look pretty good. I'm going to grab this rotation and have it swing in a little bit more. Same with this one. And actually do this one just a little bit, and then move this one. There we go. Okay. So it's swinging in nice and following the arm. Like that. Okay, so now let's make sure here. Looks pretty good. Okay, so I think we're about ready to mirror everything across. This looks pretty good. Let's do a little bit of a head bob first. Okay, now right here, he's just straight. When he's coming down, let's do this. Go to the neck. When he's coming down, he's going to straighten his head up a little bit. Okay, and then he's going to hit that midpoint where he's normal. And then on the up, his neck's going to move forward a little bit. Okay, and then back up. Now it looks like he's kind of doing the chicken here. So I actually want him to lean it forward even a little more. Maybe keep it forward. So I'm actually going to accentuate the middle one. It's a little bit more. On this one, we'll have him tilt his head forward just a little bit so he gets a little chin bob in there. Okay, so if you look at the head, look at the rotations on the head, and let's uncheck the auto height. I'm going to hit Z and actually click and drag like this. So I can see the curves better. What you do is you just hit Z and then click and drag, and you can drag this way or up and down, and it'll stretch it so you can see it better. Sometimes if you have this on, see how you can't see the graph very well. So I'm going to hit Z and then, oops, take it off. Click Z and then drag up. Click Z again, and then you can middle mouse drag down. Okay. All right, so now I can see these curves a lot better. Let's grab this right here. Bring it up a little bit so his head bobs. Whoop. Whoop. Maybe not so much. That's rotation on the X. So I want about right there. And this is rotation on the Y. Side to side, don't care about that. Just want it right there. So there we've got a little bit of head bob in there. Whoop. Okay, now maybe I'm not going to rotate it quite as much, just a little bit, flatten him out there because his neck's rotating on top of it. There we go. If you combine the rotations of the neck and the head, that was a little bit too much. See, this right here looks like it doesn't rotate at all, but the neck is rotating on top of that, and it's inheriting that. So if you look at the rotation for the neck's rotating quite a bit here. Okay, so I'm going to just make sure that curve is nice and set. Okay. All right, so I'm going to right click in the window, say save. And I think we're done. We're ready to go ahead and mirror. So now what I'm going to do is make sure that key model is on, is checked, and I'm just going to go to 0. Let me go into keyframe mode first. Now you can notice here if I scroll around that everything has a keyframe on it at each of those points. So if I consolidate here, you'll notice if I click on the bones, this shows all the bone data. So anywhere there's a keyframe on any bone, it will show up right here. And when I expand it, you can see that. So now that I've got this walk right here, I'm going to want to start mirroring it. So what I do, I go to this frame, hit copy. This is the beginning and I want it to loop, so I'm going to go to frame 24 and hit paste so that that same frame is there. Now you'll notice from here to here is what we had at the beginning. So now I'm going to go to 6, copy that, go over to 18, edit, paste mirrored. Okay, so we're getting there. Now go to 3, copy, go to 15, edit, paste mirrored. Like that. Now I'm going to go to 9, copy, go to frame 21, edit, paste mirrored. And there we go. There is my walk cycle. So now with the play range, this frame is the exact same as number 1. So if I leave my play range right here, I'm going to see that frame twice, which will look kind of weird. So I move it in just by clicking and dragging on the numbers here. You'll notice that if I do this, I can scrub, but when I get to my play range, I can just click and drag. So I'm going to leave it right there. Now, turn on repeat, hit play. Just watch him walk. Now that's a pretty fast walk, especially for a tall, lanky character like that. So one nice thing that I can do in here is I can start sliding things around. So I'm actually going to click on the bones in your project workspace, and then click on the bones in your timeline, but make sure that it's collapsed. Now you can see all the keyframes sitting here. Now the cool thing is, I'm going to right click, save it. Okay, do it again. So click bones and hide everything so you can see that. Now one thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to start stretching this out. Now there's two ways you can do it. You can select the entire thing and then just start dragging it out like this, and it will stretch it, which is a good way. If I'm going from 24 to 32, you notice how they all go to frames. If I'm going to 31, some of them sit in between frames, here, 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 here. So you don't want to do that unless you're absolutely sure your animation is totally done, because you can't edit stuff that's not on a keyframe. You can later on you can select them, right click on them and say snap to keyframe, and it will, but that ruins your even timing. So I like to keep them, I like to do this only when I know that I'm expanding it kind of, I guess you could call it exponentially or linearly, where I know that 24 frames, if I go up to 32, it will snap them all to another frame. So I'm going to go to 32, and then I'm going to hit play, and then I'm going to make sure my play range goes to 31. That's better. That's a lot better. It's still a little bit fast for him. Okay, so I'm actually going to drag it out to 36, or let's see here. See, once you start doing this, then it starts really, I'm going to have to go out to 40. Okay, so 40 seconds, or 40 frames. That's a little bit better for him. It's a slower, kind of a slower strolling walk, if you want to call it that. Now there's some things that you can do with this. You can take keyframes and start just moving them. Maybe you'll move this one out or closer just a little bit, this one closer here just a little bit. It'll give it a little more snappiness right at the beginning and slow things up in the middle a bit. So maybe I go, here, and this one here, and then play it. So now he takes a quicker step, and then it's a slower stride in between. You can do all kinds of stuff like that, and just kind of playing with the keyframes and seeing what you like and what makes it look the best. So I'm going to right click, say save, and that's my walk cycle. So now I've got a walk cycle that I can use to have my character walking. So that's the walk cycle tutorial. That action is now saved out as a separate action, and I can use that action in all kinds of other things. I can copy keyframes from it and paste into another thing, and most often I use actions to do things, repetitive motions that are in choreographies. Choreographies are what we'll go on to next to talk about setting up scenes and using actions in your choreographies and stacking them and blending them and things like that. So that's it for the walk cycle tutorial. If you want to know how to render this, I can show you real quick. What I usually do is I usually go up to this button right here, render to file. You find the camera view that you want. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here. I'm going to say render to file, click on it. It'll open up this settings box, and it'll open up what type do you want. I'm going to go with a QuickTime. I'm going to go set the compression type. It'll take just a minute, but I'm going to go with Sorensen Video 3 at 30 frames a second. I'm just going to leave it there, say OK. Now range, I want it to start at 0 and I want it to end, remember it was 40 frames long, so I want it to end at 39, so it'll loop. So I leave that there, step 1. Resolution 640 by 480, that's fine. Gamma, I don't care about that. And buffers, I can save an alpha buffer in there, or a shadow buffer, or depth, all that kind of stuff, but it's just an action, I'm not going to do that. Now options, I'm going to go to quality. I'm going to actually do, if you final, what it is, it's the absolute final render, so anti-aliased with the lighting and everything like that. It takes a little longer. If you want to do it non-final, you can either do it wireframe, you can do it shaded, you can do it shaded with wireframe, and those are a lot faster. But I'm just going to go with shaded. Multipass. If you want to do multipass, you can turn it on and then tell it I want to do a certain amount of passes. That's if you're doing motion blur. That works really well. I'll do it this time. I'll just do, turn it on. For motion blur, I usually do like 5 passes, and that's about enough, especially if I'm doing just shaded view, just to see what it looks like. So I'm going to turn on motion blur. I'm going to keep it at about 20%. Depth of field, don't care. Draw particles, hair, don't care. Polys per patch, 4, that's fine. Back-facing polys, that's fine. And show decals, I don't have any, but that's fine too. So then make sure it's going to my right place. I'm going to say file name. I'm just going to go to the desktop, or go to hash. Let's see here. I'm just going to go to the desktop and call it walk. And then I'm just going to hit OK. Now what it'll do is it'll start running through it real quick, and you'll notice this is the frames and this is the total, and the frames are going right here, and you can see them. That's going pretty quick. It's doing 5 passes about every second. So it's going pretty quick, especially when it's actually it's showing bones in that. Let me abort it for a second, and I'll show you how to get rid of that. I'm just going to close it, go to render file, go to options and unshaded, where it says show bones. Make sure you just leave it off. So I'm going to hit OK. It's going to start again. And I'll pause it while it does that. Okay, so it finished the render. I'm going to go up to this box right here, play animation file, and it'll just open it to wherever I saved it. Click it and hit open. It'll take just a second to open it. And then you can play your animation and see what it looks like. Looks pretty smooth. I'm going to hit Control L. Have it loop. It's a pretty good little walk cycle there. And one thing that I need to make sure happens is, you can see he hits when it goes between, or when it loops over, it kind of snaps. And one reason for that is the graph. So if you notice, I'm going to click right here and I'm going to hit bones. Oops. In the action, I'm going to hit the bones folder. You'll notice here, I'm actually just going to turn that on. The way that the graph moves is it's duplicating. It's basically when you repeat it, it's grabbing this and putting it at the end. Now if these ins don't match those outs, you're going to have a problem. And so one thing I like to do, just depends on the curve, is I go into the hands and I notice, like, this right here to this right here, I'm actually going to change the tangent of it just slightly so that it curves in just a little bit. Okay, this one to this one is not the same, so I'm actually going to grab it and move the tangent just a little bit, and this one, flatten this tangent out just a little bit. So basically what I'm doing is, I noticed that this one's really pretty flat, but this one was going like this. So what I need to do is I need to even those out. So I'm going to grab this and move this so that it meshes into that low-lying curve. Okay. So I just go through and I, created a keyframe, didn't want to do that. Grab it, make sure that the curve is still valid, but that it kind of smooths out a little bit. You can see it there. Green to green, same kind of thing. You can flatten it out just a little bit. This one too. Okay. This one too. I'm just going to flatten it out a bit. Now sometimes what people will do is they'll grab them, right click, say interpolation method 0 slope. What that does is, by default, it flattens it out. Flattens the slope on it. So I'm going to say 0 slope. Now you'll notice that they kind of flatten and then go into it. The problem with that is you've got this big nice curve, and what you want it to do is continue on. You don't want it to flatten out. So I usually avoid doing that. I keep it just as spline, and then I fix it just with the bias handles. So this one just stay there. These other ones look pretty good. This one could stand to be flattened a little bit there. And these two, let me make sure it's these. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to grab these, pull them down just slightly. These two, pull them down just a little bit. So I'm getting a little better curve, smoother curve in between. And this, same kind of thing. And this one here. Now this is really nitpicky. You don't necessarily have to do this with all that you have, but when you have a cycle, you don't want it to be kind of poppy in the middle when it cycles over. So I would go through and do that on each of the hands and feet and the hips, the major parts of the body that'll snap. Your torso doesn't do much movement, but your head does, your hands do, and your feet do. So make sure that you go through and you check that. Here's a perfect example. This right here, if you look at the way it comes down right here, but it starts back over here and goes right back up. So this is going to be a harsh bounce like this, and you actually want it to kind of smooth in like this. So that's stuff you just have to kind of play with, and you have to kind of just finesse a little bit so that it looks a lot better. But that just comes with tweaking your keys and flattening out your tangents. So just make sure that I kind of do this. And this one, kind of the same. So I just kind of shrink it down. Do that so that when it comes into it, it's a little nice curve. So same thing here. Okay. So stuff like that makes a big difference because it gets rid of that popping in the middle of your animation. But that makes all the difference in the world when you're trying to do a cycle that's very tight. You need to make sure that your curves match up. So that's it for the walk cycle. Like I said, now we will go on to talking about choreographies and how to animate in choreographies and use choreographies, and we'll be doing a run animation and some other animations in choreographies.